Welcome back to the third installment of the Elliott Architects project House on a Wharf.
Yep, on the mid-coast of Maine.
Where we are going over the exterior image that we have selected from the shoot. My favorite exterior image, maybe. There's a couple others that are pretty dope. But this one is the one to me that was like, that's it. So composition, why I chose this image, lighting, blah, blah, blah. So compositionally, I loved how these little dinghies were kind of splaying out as they kind of come towards camera. I think that's kind of neat. I like the ropes going from the dock over to the boat. I love that this boat in the foreground is nice and like smooth because you get nice shadow lines on it, but then you also have some slatted ones further down. It's this very kind of handmade feel to stuff in the foreground. And to me, architecture is still kind of one of those things that's truly handmade in some ways that, you know, we haven't gotten to the place where we're just 3D printing houses yet.
Right.
We'll get there. And these will be
I think we are there. We're just not there on scale.
Are they doing 3D printed
I've seen
houses?
Someone's done it, yeah.
I'd probably live in a 3D printed house if it would
It's
save
kind
me
of like
money.
Put the arm in the middle and it's like a round house.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
this one, this composition, unfortunately, the tide was a little low again, but it's just what you got. The difficulty here is that you had to be very still. We are on a floating dock and, you know, you're on water, so your shutter speed couldn't get too slow because then things would start to blur out, both the boats and the house. I'd be okay if the boats blurred out, but not the house. But since you're on a floating dock, everything would blur out if you didn't keep the shutter speed kind of quick. But the water is pretty calm, and I love that you get the reflection of the boats and the trees and the sky and everything in the water there. If I had gone too much higher with the camera, we'd just be accentuating more of the seaweed and everything on the rocks, and I wasn't too much into that. If you go a lot lower, you kind of don't see the different colors of the boats by looking into the boats. So that was kind of the reason for the height I was at. The left and the right reason for where I'm at is primarily keeping those boats in the foreground lined up with the house, but still being able to splay out a little bit. If I'd gone further over to the left, we might have had a little more distraction from this light kind of between the dock and the boats. What else?
yeah, so if we just kind of cycle through, I think there was a second shot where you're just letting the boats kind of move around a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
I like that better.
Because I think we had some other compositions.
Did we go with this one or the ones with them tighter
remember.
in? I think we went with those more so.
If we went with that one, we
that
cropped
too.
it. But I think in any of the compositions with the boats, it was like, let's get a bunch of shots so we can get the boats. We can select where we want the boats.
Right. I like this one. This one feels like a mid-range to that a little bit. Boy, that's nice. But yeah, after that, you know, we didn't have any lifestyle out on the house. We're able to see into the house just barely. You can see a little yellow coming through some of the windows, which Tim was able to accentuate and post a bit. I shot a bunch of like wide and tight and everything else here. This is the one that kind of resonated the most with people because of the lines, the boats, everything in the foreground framing your, you know, view towards the house. So it's just one you end up going with. I don't think I would have added lifestyle or anything on the dock or like even lifestyle on the deck of the house and anything else is.
I think we did that with a daytime shot. We had someone standing in that open spot, and they're so small that it was a little hard to read.
And part of the issue with shooting during this time of the day is that you're trying to get a bunch of shots in that magic light.
Right.
And so to work with lifestyle in that very compressed time limitation, you know,
you're getting like one shot, especially on a dock when you're moving.
Right.
There's a lot of things to consider.
Were you out there with me on the dock?
Yeah. Swapping lenses.
Swapping lenses. Schwabbing the deck. There's not a lot to say about this other than why we chose it. And it was just such an obvious composition when you saw it. There's a couple where we were over out here more so, and they just didn't have the feeling as well
I
as
think
these.
it's the foreground and the leading line of the dock, and they all kind of lined up.
Yeah, I'm just finished writing for another video that will be coming out soon. That's probably going to be a little more interesting than this, but that the idea of how you subject yourself to chaos in a day of shooting, because there's infinite possibilities in every way,
Right.
in everything that you're doing here. And there's no right and wrong answer. It's only your own judgment, your own subjective opinion, your own subjective experience. And there's nothing that can judge what you accomplish and create other than, again, someone else's subjective opinion.
Right. Yeah. Subjective
so
on top of subjective.
Is just this really abstract, generalized, agreed opinion, both in creation and judgment of, which is, it's a very weird thing to think about, and then understand why it's so exhausting and a weird emotional experience to work in this way. But more on that in another video. But yeah, compositionally, it was all about the time of day. We waited for this time of day. We shot this shot earlier when it was bright and realized this is a nice composition, but the lighting could be better. Waited for later in the day when the light started to look a little sweet, and then went back and got this, and that's what we got.
Yeah.
We let the boats drift around a bit to get options.
Yeah.
So, look at that gradation in the water there. That's just so nice. So walk us through post-production on this, this little beauty.
Let's switch over to that.
Look at that.
So we did go with the, here we go.
That just looks so good like there. I like how much you can see into that boat in the foreground there. So that's our starting
things
layer.
like this, it's not overly complicated.
So this is the same image we were looking at before, but you've just pulled the highlights and the shadows a bit.
I think I'm mostly in this image. I just pulled the shadows because I know that I can just put any sky. If I have to, I can put any sky up. Whoop.
Whoa, hey, come on now.
You get those magic corners.
Salt and sea. Yeah.
Whatever they're called. I know I can put any sky in there. So I'm not really too concerned about that. If, with the movement of the dock, I'm thinking like, well, I can put anything up there. If the one that was there works and it's not moved around too much because of the motion, right, I'll use it. So I'm really just thinking of the foreground in this instance and the house, which were both, I think, in the same shadow, like this, the same level of darkness. I really
like what's going on in the reflection underneath the boats and then past the boats with the trees and everything, the color and distortion and everything else, ripples.
So yeah, I think it's just like my main starting point is the highlights again, and so I'm going for the sky and probably some of the foreground here. And maybe a little
now,
bit
do you start with an image that has the highlights correct and then adjust the shadows a bit and then start with that base layer, or do you start with the shadows correct?
Usually the shadows correct.
Okay.
If that's an option. Otherwise, it's like midtones, and then I'll work on both sides of the spectrum.
Okay.
But mostly shadows correct. I don't know. I don't know why I do that, but it just seems like an easier approach. Maybe it's a habit that I'm stuck in that I'm not aware of, but
I think when you boost shadows, you get more of a falling apart of the image. It
depends how complicated the highlight area is. If there's lots of things in front of the highlights that need to be cut out, or I might start with the highlights brought in because I don't have to necessarily maybe make some of those cutouts, and I can just focus on the shadows and bring those up. So it depends on the image, but I mean, the first move is just the sky and then just the foreground there. And even in this, there's not a lot to retouch.
Not going to be a lot.
There's nothing to retouch on the house, really. I don't believe, because it's so it's so far out.
Yeah, I don't. And
why is it doing that?
And I don't think you'd. I don't think you'd necessarily want to take too much out of there, anyways. I mean, it's not like you have a glaring thing from somewhere.
If we zoom in, you can see what I did.
Jeez, that's a really nice image cropped in too.
There's a few distractions. Some of our stuff that was on the deck, I mean, you can't see it from way back, but if they cropped it in or someone cropped it in, you might notice that there's some things under the deck that were hidden.
Okay.
That came out.
Oh yeah, look at that.
The little pipe on the top. Usually those always come off.
Registration on a dinghy.
Registration. A few little
just some pimples.
Like the red, like a red spot is always kind of a catch your eye kind of thing, and so I just take that off, and even the ones in here that if they're, or I could have desaturated it so it's still there, it just doesn't catch your eye. And then this little area here that's like kind of a bright square in the right side, like that always pulls your eye away for me.
Right, it really works against.
Like, but when you see it without it, it's like, oh, that moves you back away from there.
Yeah, that looks.
You just got to remember to do the reflection when you do the.
Right. Good choice.
Fill it in. That's it, really. Just a little bit of cleanup.
Sorry, I got
contrast.
up at 5.
Wake up. I was up at 6. It's not so bad.
You'll be as bad as me in an hour.
Yeah. Well, you have to do a podcast next. So. I think just bringing some contrast to this area here, especially the seaweed, I think is kind of interesting when it looks a little flat there, and
it does.
Get some of the yellow into it, the greenish yellows.
Yeah. Pro tip: be extremely careful walking on that kind of seaweed, especially while holding a very expensive camera.
You're going down.
You're going down.
You didn't go down though, I don't think.
No,
but
I've
done
had
it enough.
I've had much practice carrying surfboards across stuff like that. That you always have to have one arm free to catch yourself,
right?
Because you're going down. It's so slippery.
Color grade is kind of the last thing I do, and that's usually a combination of curves, which is like a contrast layer. Then I'll throw some color. This is really an action that I run, and it gives me all these options. I don't adjust all these all the time, but I have them in case I want to. Like I can fill in if I want to add some warmth to the highlights. In this case, it looks like I did. Maybe just a little warmth in the highlights. It's kind of a yellow because I think there was you're just getting that sunset with that yellow glow, kind of just off over those trees there, and so I just accentuate that a little bit. And then the shadows, I think, what did I do there? Yeah, I think I deepen the shadows. Like you kind of get more blue down here in the water. No mids, no saturation. I must have threw a little bit of a warmth layer, and that's only at like 5%, so you barely see it. Again, it's more about the feeling of sunset and the warm glow that you're going to get, maybe just enhancing that by just a little.
Just a smidgen.
That's if I retouch another image outside around this time, I'll just copy that color grade to all of them, so you kind of get that same feeling across. You get a uniform set of images at that time of day. Yep. And that's a good way to maintain consistency, and you can do that in the interiors too. Like if you're using if you're desaturating walls, like you open that file up and then copy that around, so you've got the same level and you're of like desaturation in something. So your couch isn't warm in one image and like kind of gray in one, or the walls are they're all uniform.
Right. Gives it a connective feel.
That's it. And then straightening it up.
Just a smidge there.
And the roof line's probably bothering you a little bit, but
a little bit, but
now that I look back at this, and I don't know if it's this light up here, like I might have just darkened this down a little bit. This bit of foreground, just a little. Your computer's maybe a little different than mine too.
Right.
But, I don't know. I think that would have helped to shift up a little bit, but I don't know.
My only thought is maybe a little bit more of a pulled out gradient. The gradient seems just a tiny bit strong, like right through there. Like it goes from dark to light just a tiny bit too quick. I probably would have stretched from the top up and allowed this brightness to go a little higher, and then put a gradient back in that just really, really gently. But I didn't notice that until we started clicking on and off layers. So I might just be completely overly critical.
And it could have been, like I said last time, adjusted further in Lightroom. Should probably get those final TIFFs to see if
compare.
There's not always a difference. I don't always do that.
Yeah, because you'll go to like 99% complete, and then you and I usually sit down and like if I have very little feedback, it's just something that you do in Lightroom and then export.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That way it's just going through and opening up files, big files. It just takes a lot longer. You can make little adjustments in Lightroom without degrading the quality or anything like that. So
right. And I would say for anyone who's running a sole proprietorship as an architectural photographer, if you get to the point where you have enough work but you're falling behind on your post-production, if you can figure it out how to save enough money up over a year to then pay someone for a year's salary and then charge for your post-production appropriately, the combination of two people being experts at what they do, working on the same project together, is far better than one person trying to do the whole thing. It works way better. You just have to find a really nice person to work with that you like. Tim's fully employed. Don't even think about it.
And Trent's a nice person to work with.
Yeah, but you have to say that.
I'm only telling our audience that. I don't.
But yeah, it's a good working arrangement, and you've done a great job on this.
Yeah, this was a great project. It was a fun one. I just knew that even the sunset was like that we got on this. You don't always get those, and sometimes they can be a little over dramatic, just without any enhancements.
Were you on site with that other Elliott project over near Stonington where we had that crazy sunset?
No, but I worked on that.
Yeah, that one was like
it's those sunsets where it's like this, like when you do the images in post-production, like it almost like doesn't look real. Like you get those like some people will replace skies.
The
and
Sasaki
like,
job recently was like that too.
Yeah, so it's like you don't want to take away from it. You almost don't need to enhance it. You just kind of have to leave it and let it speak for itself. But then
you worry about other people like a month later looking at the image and be like, they faked that. Right. I'm like, no, this is what it looked like.
Well, you have the other angles of this. If we jumped back into the image.
The sky got really pink and nice.
From over here. We got real nice and pink, and it was like, whoa, like everything aligned.
That I really liked the one recently that we did of the house on North Haven.
Yeah, that one.
That was like an all-encompassing pink glow everywhere. Yeah, like it wasn't a specific sky thing. It's like something was going on.
It gave the house like a pink.
Yeah,
it gave everything a weird pink glow, and it was like I almost didn't like how dramatic it was, but you couldn't do anything.
You couldn't deny it. So it's like, hey,
there it is. Run with it, let it enhance a little bit, and yeah.
Well, that's this exterior image and an interior image from one of the nicest projects that I've ever been involved with because of the combination of really good design and just mind-blowing location, and really happy with how the whole thing turned out. Thank you, Elliott Architects, for trusting us to interpret your work to the world. So, anything else?
No, I think you summed it up nicely.
Peace and chicken grease.
Later.